Introducing me. As you mentioned, I work for IESALC, and we focus very much on higher education. And these past few months, we have been developing different research regarding artificial intelligence, specifically in higher education. So going from teaching and learning to research, to the future of work, etc. This is our latest publication. In this QR code, you can download it. It's open source, so please feel free to do it whenever you want. And now we can start. So before going deep into the uses and challenges of artificial intelligence in higher education, I want to stop a little bit and talk about what is artificial intelligence, okay? Because artificial intelligence has been around for quite a while now, actually. It's more or less 40 years that we have been developing artificial intelligence systems. But since last year, with the advent of ChatGPT, it has sort of become a buzzword again. So the first thing to know is that there is actually no universally accepted definition of artificial intelligence. And this is because there's a need for a flexible interpretation of the term to be able to incorporate new developments, because as you know, things change very, very quickly. So in this sense, UNESCO's approach to artificial intelligence focuses on the imitation of human intelligence. So we consider artificial intelligence to be machines capable of imitating certain functionalities of human intelligence, like learning, reasoning, problem solving, language interaction, and even producing creative work. In this sense, to be able to have a clearer idea, it's good to separate artificial intelligence by capabilities. And in this sense, we have two main families. So we have artificial narrow intelligence, or weak AI, and we also have artificial general intelligence, or strong AI. Strong AI, it's the artificial intelligence we tend to see in movies. Okay, so if you are familiar, for example, with the movie Her, where Phoenix falls in love with this artificial intelligence, that would be strong AI. But right now, in this moment of development, we have not achieved that kind of artificial intelligence. So right now, we are living in the weak AI paradigm, basically. So this is a very important difference to make, okay? And in this sense, within the weak AI umbrella, we have two main forms of artificial intelligence. We have predictive and we have generative artificial intelligence. And these are two different things. So predictive artificial intelligence uses algorithms to analyze past data and predict outcomes for new data. In higher education, this has been used for a while now. For example, to manage student enrollment, for retention, for strategies of retention, to allocate scholarships, for example. Generative AI, instead, uses advanced deep learning methods to generate new content similar to what a human being could develop himself or herself. So ChatGPT, for example, is a type of generative AI. And in higher education, this can be used in general in the teaching and learning process to create didactic content and in the translation of texts, for example. We are currently using artificial intelligence more than you think. For example, when we are in Netflix and Netflix suggests new series based on what we watch, that's predictive AI. The same thing happens with Spotify, for example. So in our day-to-day life, we are all sort of impacted by artificial intelligence in social media platforms, in self-driving cars, in virtual assistants, with chatbots, etc. Recently, there have been many factors driving AI. From one side, we have research. So right now, there's a lot of research related to artificial intelligence, and also more patents in this sense. Also, we have much more computer power. So algorithmic advances have also made possible this new spring of artificial intelligence, so to speak. And evidently, also investment is quite important for the advent of artificial intelligence. And in this sense, there has been a lot of investment, especially in the private sector. So right now is business investment what is dominating research and development in artificial intelligence. But also public research funded by governments is increasing as well. A very important thing to have in mind is that the fuel for artificial intelligence is data, because artificial intelligence needs enormous amounts of data to learn from and to provide services based on this data. And this data comes from everything we do in our common life: cell phones, smartwatches, online shopping websites, security systems, learning management systems, and even more. So this is something to really take into account, as we will see later on, because data has different challenges, so to speak. And as I was saying before, what has sort of revamped the interest in artificial intelligence has been ChatGPT, because it has taken artificial intelligence closer to the user. If before this was a world delimited to experts, so to speak, right now anyone can use ChatGPT. Students, teachers, and really anyone that has a connection and a computer can use ChatGPT. So this was a brief introduction to what artificial intelligence is, and now we will see artificial intelligence in the learning, teaching and assessment process. So how is artificial intelligence used in teaching and learning? It can be used in many different ways, especially in personalized learning, as we will see in the following slides, but also in inclusion and well-being of the student, also in analyzing and assessing the student progress. And of course, all of this raises questions of academic integrity. So talking about personalized learning, this helps to provide students and teachers with individualized feedback. And in this sense, artificial intelligence can provide immediate feedback. It can also make recommendations and adapt assessments. It can help identifying learning styles and patterns, and it can measure performance. So related to the immediate feedback, there are automatic grading and various forms of assessments that have been powered by AI. And this also empowers students with a choice to receive feedback in a more continuous way, so keeping track of their own progress at their own rhythm. It can, as I said, also make recommendations. For example, in Georgia State University, they are using a predictive algorithm to flag when students sign up for courses that perhaps are outside of areas that can contribute to their majors and that could undermine their performance. So this algorithm is also used to trigger meetings between students and academic advisors to find possible alternatives for the student. It can, as I mentioned, adapt assessments. So by identifying patterns, such as why perhaps a student is not progressing in a certain way, maybe it's linked to the lack of time, of a lack of motivation, or to insufficient repetition. And like this, it is possible to build a personalized learning environment using the technology of the student's choice. It can be social media, search engines, videos, etc. And this allows learners to co-create their own learning path. which could increase their motivation and self-regulation skills as well. In identifying learning styles and patterns, as I mentioned, artificial intelligence collects a lot of data, or can collect a lot of data on student interaction. And like this, it can support their learning. There's a research paper that shows that a group of Japanese students learning English, the ones who adopted AI in their learning, outperformed those who did not by 32 points out of a 990-point scale. And this was for language learning. So these Japanese students were learning English. It can also help us measuring performance. So pre and post learning assessments can be done with AI to ensure a minimum level of competency. In Australia, faculty have created a program that tracks face and eye movement during online lectures to be able to understand whether the student is engaged or not, for example. And this can allow faculty also to adjust the lecture or to prepare more engaging content for the next time. All of this, all of what I have mentioned until now, can also collapse within intelligent tutoring systems. And intelligent tutoring systems have been available in higher education for a long time, right? But right now they are more powerful, so to speak, thanks to AI as well. They can enable personalized learning paths. They can provide the ability to monitor students in real time. They can diversify customized learning resources, and even more. We will see examples in the following slides. In India, the Amrita University has developed a very specific ITS for vocational training, for example. And in the UK, the Open University has designed an ITS to provide feedback on draft essays. And this is quite interesting because normally ITS are more used in engineering subjects that have more closed answers than in subjects that are more open, so to speak. So these two developments are quite interesting in the potential use of AI within intelligent tutoring systems. Chatbots are also being used for learning, for example. So AI-powered chatbots, they have the capacity to reply to students' inquiries and to direct them to the right content and resources. And in this sense, we have many examples. We have the University of Bolton in the United Kingdom with its chatbot Ada that has delivered personalized learning and assessment for 70,000 students. And they also answer questions about the curriculum content and attendance requirements, for example. Similarly, in the Georgia Institute of Technology, there's this chat called Jill Watson that replies to students' online questions without that student really realizing that it was a software. And this was only revealed by the teacher at the end of the semester. And this chatbot specifically has also been rolled out to be used in any course. So the initial development took quite a while, but then it was able to be replicated for many other courses. Another potential application of AI in higher education is within virtual and augmented reality. This is the least developed application for AI because it's very expensive to develop a VR and AR. But for example, in Canada, the Mohawk College is delivering learning modules using augmented reality for some technician courses, where students are unable to relocate to the campus for family reasons or financial reasons, for example. As I mentioned, besides the learning process itself, AI can also be used to increase inclusion. In San Diego, the University of San Diego, it's actually the first higher education institution to use an AI-powered application called Aira that delivers real-time visual descriptions for people who have low vision or who are blind. So this is a very interesting potential of artificial intelligence to help universities be more inclusive. I was recently in a conference in China, and all the Chinese speakers' speeches were automatically translated into English using artificial intelligence. So like that, I was able to understand what was being said. This is just a little example of my personal experience with artificial intelligence that I wanted to share with all of you. Continuing talking about inclusion, for example, and well-being. And in the University of Malaysia, they have developed a chatbot called Chat With Me that is able to identify the emotions of the user, and it can flag who might be at risk of suicide, for example, and then it can steer that person toward mental health professionals. And in Peru, where I am from, a university, the University of San Marcos, has developed an AI news broadcaster that once a week broadcasts the news in Quechua. So Quechua is a language, is an indigenous language spoken by around a quarter of the population in Peru, but education is only in Spanish, right? So this is also a way to be more inclusive in higher education institutions using artificial intelligence. AI can also help assessment. It can help us identifying patterns of why a student is not progressing, and it can also identify the reasons of this lack of progression. So, yeah. Again, of course, this also has its own limitations, right? Education cannot really be reduced to a set of quantitative variables and methods. There are things that pertain the teacher and the person that is in the room with the students that are as important as whatever assessment a software can develop. Also, the assessments made by AI can lead to solutions that are more oriented towards technology rather than pedagogy. And yes, like I mentioned, while AI-based tools can be helpful for monitoring and reinforcing the consolidation of learning, they cannot really replace human professors. So it's really important for us as teachers, and I mention myself as well because I'm a teacher too, to see this as another tool, right? But not as something that will overtake the teaching profession, because there's a human component within the teaching profession that AI will never be able to achieve. And students actually are already using artificial intelligence to develop their assessments. This year, a survey in the USA found that 43% of the 1,000 universities students surveyed had already used AI tools like ChatGPT. So most of them completed their work independently and used AI for specific parts. And only a small percentage, so only 17% of the students submitted work produced by AI without making any modification. And in this sense, I wanted to bring to this presentation one of the latest research papers done about students and students using AI for assessments, ChatGPT specifically. So this study found that, yes, students do use AI and ChatGPT, but most of them understand the limitations and potential inaccuracies that can be found in AI softwares. They see AI as an upgraded version of Google or an interactive Wikipedia, and they actually want their teachers to teach them how to use AI tools and to teach them about the risks, the biases, and the limitations of these tools as well. Ways that we can adapt in higher education institutions to AI assessments is, for example, using assessments that are difficult for AI tools to produce, like podcasts, group activities, reflections, grading participation. And also, a very important thing is that as institutions, we can update our guidelines to allow the use of AI tools in assessments, sometimes with conditions, right? So it can be used to support planning, but the AI-generated text should not be the final output, for example. Moving on to AI and research, here we have found that research on AI has exponentially grown in the past years, and pattern recognition is the area in which more research is being done. Okay, and very interestingly, and perhaps a bit worryingly, only 1.4% of articles on AI applications in higher education address issues on ethics, challenges, and risks. So this is something to take into account. When we are beginning to do research on AI, it's always fundamentally important to consider the ethical part of AI. We will see this later in the presentation. And because AI is a very complex field, it should have researchers across many different areas. So not only the people that do STEM should be researching AI, everyone should be involved, and it should be interdisciplinary research. Right now, the largest volume of publications on AI comes from China, right? So it represents 9 of the top 10 institutions based on number of publications. And the 10th institution is based in the USA. And 60% of AI publications are journal articles. So these are peer-reviewed, and they publish confirmed findings, which also shows the maturity of the field. So AI tools can support every aspect of research. It can analyze large data sets during the design research process. It can identify patterns in data collection process. It can predict scenarios in data analysis process. And also it can help in the dissemination of findings, for example. And again, artificial intelligence should assist, but not replace humans in the research process. Yes, I think that to be able to talk more about competencies and ethics, I will just go quite quickly through the next following slides. So again, in the research design process, AI can provide stimuli to humans, to foster lateral thinking. It can act as a Socratic opponent when we are developing the first steps of our research. It can also give us suitable information in the early stages of our research, or even suggest papers for the theoretical framework, for example. In the data collection and analysis part of research, it can help us identifying patterns and relationships within very big data sets that could allow the researcher then to spend more time in the more creative part of the research process. It can reduce the burden of research by scanning information that is currently held on paper to make it digital, for example. And in the dissemination of findings, it can assist with the writing process. It can help identify errors in a manuscript, so it can also act as an editing assistant. It can track and manage references, and it can also help in translation. Of course, there are limitations and issues with AI in research as well. Artificial intelligence does this thing sometimes, which is called that it hallucinates. So sometimes it can invent, for example, fake references or produce insufficiently specific text, right? So all of these risks could undermine the originality of knowledge production, and this is why it's paramount that anything that is given to an AI is then reviewed by a human being that has the expertise and the knowledge to realize these mistakes. And of course, there are also ethics concerning AI, right? Right now, existing processes may not account for research using AI because there is no common understanding of how to manage this. There are no common regulations to say, can I use AI and can I quote AI in a research paper, for example? Then, of course, there are no assurances on whether algorithms are interpretable of have transparency. There's a lot of bias inside the data that AI is currently using. So that's another problem, sorry. And a very big issue in research in AI is that there's a huge gender imbalance. Okay, so you can see in this graph that most researchers on AI are men, right? And this also has implications for the bias within the data that is being produced by AI. So basically, only if we foster a truly diverse and inclusive STEM environment can the creation of AI systems be more fair and biased and effectively serve all segments of society. And this is not an imbalance only related to gender, but also an imbalance related to the global north and the global south, an imbalance related to privileged students versus unprivileged students, and so forth. Going now into AI and administration, this is more geared towards predictive AI. So this has the power to help higher education institutions to optimize scheduling, to track how teaching rooms are booked, for example, and to improve room allocation strategies and processes. It can also help in decision making. It has been used to assign scholarship, for example, and also in retention strategies for students. Of course, that applying AI systems within a higher education institutions requires a certain structure, right? You have to have sufficient IT infrastructure and financial and human resources to be able to effectively and efficiently implement and incorporate artificial intelligence for these purposes. So in this sense, so these are the results of a survey of 450 education institutions around the world, and the results are as follows. So only 13% of universities have some kind of guidance related to how to use AI within the institution. So the lack of understanding and agility on the side of institutions can be a problem as well, because there are risks in the unplanned implications of AI use in relation to the data safety, knowledge diversity, equity, and inclusion as well. So in this sense, what are the main policy areas that higher education institutions should take into account when incorporating AI? They have to do with academic integrity, with research ethics, and with transparency and accountability. So there should be guidelines preventing plagiarism. There should be guidelines to detect AI-generated content and to ensure that these technologies are used appropriately in student assessments. Also, the institutions should establish guidelines to ensure the ethical use of AI in research. So things related to privacy, to data security, to transparency, to bias mitigation, right? And also provide clear explanations of how AI technologies are being used within the institutions. Students and teachers should know if they are sourcing their data to a certain software and what are the decision-making processes involved in this. These are two examples. In Helsinki, in Finland, in the University of Helsinki, there are specific AI ethics committees to oversee the ethical implications of AI in research and teaching, for example. So these projects are evaluated to ensure compliance with ethical guidelines and to promote responsible AI practices. And in Mexico, in the Tec de Monterrey, there's already guidance on the use of ChatGPT for faculty and students. So professors are encouraged to discuss the appropriate and ethical use of ChatGPT in class. So there are certain conditions, there are certain conditions that should be met by higher education institutions at a governance level, right? So as I mentioned before, this incorporation requires technical and organizational change. It requires to know why data is being collected and for what purposes, and how to turn the data into useful and meaningful analysis. The data needs to be sufficient and reliable. And of course, you need human resources that are able to work with data and to understand the higher education context. And now to talk a bit about the competencies and skills for the artificial intelligence era. As you can imagine, the artificial intelligence job postings have increased exponentially in the past few years, as you can see by this graph. And this evidently is something to be expected. So there is an increasing demand for AI knowledge and skills in the labor market. It is expected that around 2/3 of the existing jobs may be susceptible to some kind of automation due to AI. And of course, we need to update educational practices considering this impact, right? So the expectation is that AI will complement high-skilled jobs and not replace them, and that high-skilled professionals will have more time for innovation, creativity, reasoning, and the interpersonal aspects of work. So the future of jobs and AI can be applied to any of these areas, from renewable energies to content creation, to data analysis, to cybersecurity and e-commerce. So really the impact of AI will be felt in most areas of our current job markets and systems. And not only, artificial intelligence will also be embedded in our daily lives. So for every professional beyond STEM areas and for every citizen beyond higher education. And this is why, besides focusing on training in specific AI skills, higher education institutions should also focus their training in meta skills. So in critical thinking, in creativity, in emotional intelligence, in teamwork, problem solving, collaboration, and leadership. So to talk a little bit about these skills that can be developed within higher education institutions, for example, AI literacy, right? Which is the widespread understanding of the basic functioning, the potential benefits and challenges of AI. This should be taught throughout the different courses, not only in STEM, not only in engineering, but also in humanities, in arts, in every single subject. So introducing AI literacy elements into non-AI specific programs, it's also paramount. It should be something taught transversally. And these trainings, as I mentioned, should be included in all the subjects. AI ethics, and I cannot stress this enough. These are a vital part of the transversal skills needed to face the AI era. So in the USA right now, from a total of 51 higher education courses that exist on AI, ethics in different forms are covered in these 51 institutions, right? So bias, automation and robots, law and policies, consequences of algorithms, privacy, future of AI, and history of AI are courses that are being already taught in these 51 institutions. But this is not universal. So we also have to keep this in mind. There's a big difference between higher education institutions in the global north and higher education institutions in the global south. Data literacy is another skill that will be extremely important. And this is the individual's ability to use data effectively, to engage in critical reflection and extract meaningful insights, explore and comprehend data, and facilitate a meaningful conversation and understanding. And this can focus in two different aspects. You can either develop analytical skills or emphasize the ability to critically evaluate and consume data. Critical thinking. This, again, paramount in the era that we are stepping into. And well, we are actually already in it, but we are going deeper inside each day, right? So critical thinking offers a way to guide students to become more discerning in their self-directed learning. So especially now where content can be created so easily with AI, and AI cannot discern between true and false information, critical thinking is very, very important. And in average, only 45% of university students demonstrate proficiency in critical thinking. So this is actually a thing that should be introduced since elementary school, right? Not only at a higher education level, but throughout the education pipeline. So integrating, so as AI progresses, people will need to reskill and upskill to be able to adapt. So we will need to address the integration of AI, not only for the students, but also for the teachers and for the people that work in administration in higher education institutions. So again, the importance to have the time to understand artificial intelligence, to understand how we want to use it in the university, and then to train and to give time to students, teachers, and admin to be able to learn this is very, very important. And yes, the teacher profession, so teaching staff at higher education institutions, are the most likely to have their role affected by these technologies. So a lot of people in higher education institutions, especially in the global north, has already tried and is using AI technologies. But again, teachers need to be trained not only in AI tools, but in their effective integration into the classroom. So it's always very important to keep in mind, what is my purpose as a teacher? What do I want to achieve with this? And in achieving this purpose, do I need to use an AI technology or not? Because it's not always the case that I need to use it to achieve the purpose that I have. But a revision of pedagogies and methodologies for teaching with AI tools has to be considered by higher education institutions. So what can higher education institutions do to foster an environment conducive for teacher professional development? Again, introduce AI, include tips on how to use AI according to the regulations of the higher education institutions, create opportunity for faculty, staff, and students to discuss the impact of AI and to construct strategies to adapt and adopt AI. And it's important that everyone is involved in this process, not only the leadership of higher education institutions, but the students, the teachers, everyone. And again, it is crucial to provide training to all internal colleagues on AI ethics. Again, I mentioned these are the key challenges of the integration of AI. I will run through this quite quickly because I think we're running out of time and questions and answers are quite important. So there is a divide in the investment possibilities of countries within AI. And of course, there's an uneven distribution within the world, right? As I have mentioned before. There's a problem with inclusion. So there's not enough gender equality or racial diversity in AI matters. In the USA, for example, PhD enrollments, only 2.4% of students are Black or African American compared to the 45.6% of students who are white. And all of this impacts the bias that sits behind data and AI. Okay, so talking about bias, as I mentioned, AI is fueled with bias. It's fueled by data, and data is full of bias because it's humans that provide data. Okay, and right now we are using a very limited amount of data sets. So only 12 data sets are used in most papers of machine learning. And of these data sets, most of them are developed in the USA, in Germany, or in Hong Kong. So all the rest of the world is sort of excluded from these data sets. And this replicates certain biases and certain ways of seeing the world. There are also sustainability problems in AI, in the value chain that develops AI systems, and also, I lost. sorry, in the supply chain to develop AI systems, and also using AI system uses a lot of energy. So a full training of one AI model with 6 billion parameters is estimated to be equivalent of burning a railway carload of coal. So never stop thinking about the sustainability issues that are behind the use of AI. Commercialization is another big issue. Most AI technologies are owned by private companies, right? So this can also bring problems to the use of AI for public good, for example, or the people that are excluded from AI softwares because they cannot pay, for example. And this takes me to the ethics of AI in higher education. And for this, the UN has published a guideline of ethics that have to be governable, sustainable, equitable, traceable, reliable, and responsible. So this document, again, it's also open source. You can look for it and get a deeper understanding of the ethics of artificial intelligence. But the UNESCO recommendation on the ethics of artificial intelligence is at the top of all the work that we do on artificial intelligence. And it deals with the ethical impact assessment, with data policy, with how to deal with gender, with environment and ecosystems, culture, the economy and labor, etc. It's a very complete document, and I advise, if you're interested, to go deeper into that. And how to apply the ethical recommendations within higher education institutions, it's in different ways, right? So you have the ethical governance and stewardship. So processes should be transparent, multidisciplinary, and multi-stakeholder. They should promote inclusive and equitable participation in discussions on AI governance. Higher education institutions should establish networks or use the existing ones to exchange ideas on AI ethics, developing international research and collaborations on the ethics of AI as well. Gender should be considered, so increasing the number of female students in AI-related courses, provide incentives and support for female students for professional development, and also promote indigenous and endangered languages, which may be negatively impacted by automated translation and voice assistance. Right now, I think 92.5% of the documents and the data used for AI are in English. So there's a huge potential of exclusion for every other language that we speak in this beautiful world that we all call home. So as a last recommendation, don't fall for the hype. So leadership of higher education institutions are encouraged to carefully consider the decisions made around integrating AI and not rush to invest based on the current hype. But at the same time, not ignore the developments. We cannot, in Spanish you say, tapar el sol con un dedo. We cannot make, I mean, AI is here to stay. So we should not ignore developments, but we should neither rush to invest if we have not thought about how to ethically incorporate AI in our institutions. And any tool that is adopted should be beneficial for the institution, and the impact for the stakeholders should also be carefully understood. Again, this is the primer that I talked about in this presentation. This document, of course, is much more complete than what I have been able to say. I think this is the end of my presentation, but of course, I think we still have time for some questions and answers. I will stop sharing my screen now, if it's okay. And yes, if anyone has questions, I think we still have around maybe 10 minutes to address some questions that you might have.
Yeah, Arianna, thank you so much. And we have some participants in person and most of the participants online. And we will give one by one a chance to raise hand and ask your questions, or you can send your questions in our Q&A box. In the beginning, yeah, we have the first question from in person.
Okay.
Thank you so much for such a great presentation. It's really wonderful. I have a question about if you have any advice for us, any of us who are tuned in here, are educators, people in higher ed. If you have any advice for us on resources that we can use to educate ourselves about AI and to learn ourselves about how to best use it so that we can teach our students.
Of course. So at the beginning of September, so this is quite recent, the UNESCO has launched a competency framework, for example, for teachers and students on AI. That's a very good document that you can check in the UNESCO webpage. I will share the webpage in a minute on the chat, so anyone can access that. You have the document that I presented today that has a lot of examples of how universities around the world are implementing AI. So that's also a document you can review. There is the ethics document that I presented last that is a bit longer, but it's very, very useful to frame AI if you wish to incorporate it in the institution as well. But right now, UNESCO is working a lot in the development of new documents that are going to sort of guide education institutions, primary, secondary, and higher, into an ethical incorporation of AI in the institutions. So I will quickly share the UNESCO page where you can all find this information, while maybe there is someone else that wants to have a question. But in here, wait a second, in the chat here. In that webpage, you can find all the publications that the United Nations, specifically UNESCO, is publishing related to AI. So if you type in the search engine artificial intelligence, you will see everything that has been done until now. But there are many more to come.
Great, thank you so much.
Now we will move to online questions, and I believe we have one raised hand, and I'm going to give the rights to talk. The person who is labeling as a hearing has raised the hand. Would you like to ask the question?
Yeah, and I think there's one typed as well. By Faris. Maybe I can answer that.
Yeah, we would appreciate.
Okay, so for everyone that is in the room in presence, the question that Faris Musta is making is, how would you evaluate the response of higher education thus far? Would you say that they are moving at a good pace, or are we behind? And which universities seem to be leaders in this? So I would say that we are not moving very fast. Actually, it's very few the number of universities that have produced guidelines on how to use AI. This is actually a movement that is more bottom up. So it's more teachers than the institution itself that is using AI and is creating sort of guidelines for their own students. But this process is also making the institutions take notice and start developing their own guidelines. But it's very important to have the guidelines because these are the rules of the game, right? So if we don't have the rules of the game, we cannot take action on anything. We cannot say to the student, you did something wrong because we didn't have the rules in place. So it's very important to catch up in that sense. And the country that has more regulations in place, even at a national level, is China. So China has a national policy on the use of AI. It's one of the only countries in the world. I think now Rwanda in Africa has also published a guideline on AI as a national policy. So what's allowed and what's not allowed, not only in education, evidently, if it's a national policy, it goes beyond education as well. But yes, I believe this is a process that has begun more bottom up. No, so the teacher realizing that the student is using it. So, okay, I need to do something about it. So what I'm going to allow and what am I not going to allow? I make a guideline. Then the institution realizing, teachers are allowing their students to use it. How? Right? So this is why I mentioned that in this process, all the institutions should be involved, not only the leadership, but the students and the teachers as well, because it's something that impacts everything. I hope I answered your question.
Any question from the Q&A then? We have a question in the room as well, so.
There's
Yeah,
one.
hey, question is, what is UNESCO doing to sort of create any kind of global framework or something for, as you mentioned, higher educations to follow, or, you know, some of these nation states that are coming up with their own rules about what is the ethical use of AI? Is UNESCO doing anything, any kind of guideline for, global guideline?
Yeah, there's this is another document that you can also review. This was done in 2019, the Beijing Consensus, which has been signed and confirmed by member states. I don't know if by the USA, because the USA was not a member state of UNESCO in 2019. They just came back in this year, quite recently, actually, I think in July. So I'm not sure if the USA has signed this agreement. But in any case, the Beijing Consensus is this sort of global consensus on the correct use of AI. And this is what is informing the different national policies of the countries that have signed this document.
Thank you.
I'm going to write it here, Beijing Consensus.
Not a question, but observation, rather. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes.
So there has been a criticism. I mean, the very AI is critiqued as something, you know, as a stumbling block for creativity. And young minds, you know, quite often fall victim or succumb to the unethical frame. And so what could be the challenges in terms of, as you made it very clear in your deliberations, no doubt about it, but what are the possible challenges to curb the ethical, frames in future? Because it is it is not widely used, but it is rather, I mean, ubiquitously accepted, and it is in process. And as you rightly pointed out, that some kind of SOPs are needed to control this kind of plagiarism and all. So what are what would be your measures in the future to curb the widespread unethical practices?
Okay, I think this is still a very much open debate. So even in the academic community, there are sort of two sides. So there is one side that says, okay, yes, for example, we can allow ChatGPT to be the co-author of a paper if we use it. It's okay. And then there is another side that says no, and it's categorical. So it's a very much open debate. I think also because we are right now in the beginning of the potential of what AI can do. And it's not only impacting education, but it's impacting all the different areas. And we are not only, I mean, it's easy when you talk about AI to think about ChatGPT, but actually there are AI applications that are coming on every single day and more. There's a very interesting webpage that you can check that it's called Futurepedia, I think Futurepedia, like this, like Wikipedia, but Futurepedia. And in that webpage, they publish every AI application that comes out every day. And it's crazy because it's impossible to keep on top of everything that is happening. It's very, very fast. And this is actually a problem. And I don't know if I will be able to answer your question, but we are only humans, right? So we take time to think, to deliberate, we take time to think about the ethical implications, but technology is like this. So while we think, technology is already 10 steps ahead of us. And one of the big problems of this is that technology is very much in the hand of private companies that are for profit. So they are thinking of their profit. They are not really thinking about the ethical consequences of what they are doing or what could happen, no? So that's more in the public sort of sector realm. And yeah, the timings are, you know, we are not in a same level playing field. I think that's an expression in English. We take more time than technology takes time. So it's a very much open debate, and I do not have a specific answer on it. Just, you know, thoughts.
Thank you so much. It's a bit after 10 now. I've really enjoyed your presentation. I highly recommend the report. For those who haven't read it, it's got, you know, wonderful, wonderful things in there. And this was super helpful for all of us who are looking towards the future and trying to figure out the best ways and the most ethical ways to use these amazing tools in higher education. Thank you so much.
I will paste the link of the report in the chat, so that anyone that wants to read more on this can access it by clicking into this, the last link I sent.
Great. Thank you so much.
Can I ask one more question? Actually, are there any conferences that you recommend for kind of engaging further and learning more information about this?
Specific, well, there was one at the beginning of this month in Paris. It was the Digital Learning Week organized by UNESCO. There are the plenary sessions which focused also on AI were recorded. So let me see if I can find them here. Digital Learning. And I will paste them in the chat as well. Yes, okay. So, of course, this event already passed, but some of the resources that were published during the event and most of the keynote speakers that gave a speech on that day were recorded. So you can see them and you can access that information through the link that I just sent.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
You're very welcome. So I hope you enjoyed today, and I hope, I don't know, that you learned something new and maybe have more questions than answers. That's always a good thing. And yeah, it was a pleasure for me to be here with you today. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you for all of our participants, everyone who came. Hope to see you. Hope you'll be able to attend some more of the events this week for the BITESL Symposium. Thank you.
Bye.